The proposal. I wasn't expecting much when my phone buzzed with an incoming call from Sarah Connors. It had been years since we had last seen each other, back in high school, where we shared a few awkward encounters, a handful of laughs, and a distant friendship that never quite faded, but never really deepened either. We had stayed connected through social media, occasionally liking each other's posts and leaving the occasional comment, but we were hardly what you'd call close. So when I saw her name flash across my screen, I hesitated. Was this a mistake? A butt dial? Or worse, a scammer using her number? Curious, I answered. "Hey, Mike," she said, her voice warm, but carrying an edge of nervousness. "Sarah," I replied, surprised. "Wow, I wasn't expecting to hear from you. What's up?" She exhaled sharply, as if bracing herself. "I need a favor, and I know this is going to sound crazy, but I'm hoping you'll say yes." A favor? My mind immediately ran through worst-case scenarios. Was she in trouble? Did she need money? "All right," I said cautiously. "You have my attention. What's going on?" There was a pause before she spoke again. "I need you to pretend to be my boyfriend." I blinked. Once. Twice. Then frowned, pulling the phone away to make sure I'd heard correctly. "Wait. What?" "It's not what you think," she rushed to explain, her voice laced with something between desperation and amusement. "It's just for a few weeks, long enough for me to survive a family event without my dad thinking I'm a complete failure in life." My eyebrows furrowed. "Sarah, I'm not exactly boyfriend material." "Why me?" She let out a small chuckle. "Because you're safe. You're not a player. And you're not someone who would take this the wrong way. Plus, I trust you." I let her words settle, rolling them around in my head. "So let me get this straight," I said. "You need a fake boyfriend to impress your family." "Yeah, pretty much," she admitted, sighing. "It's my dad. He thinks I'm too focused on my career and not settling down. He's been on my case nonstop about it. And I need a break. If he sees me with someone, even if it's just for show, he'll back off. Maybe even stop treating me like some tragic case." It sounded ridiculous, like something straight out of a rom-com, but she sounded serious and desperate. I rubbed the back of my neck, debating. I had nothing else going on, no girlfriend to complicate things, and honestly, it didn't sound like the worst favor in the world. "How long are we talking here?" I asked. "Just a couple of weeks," she promised. "Maybe a few family events, a couple of social gatherings. We'd set some ground rules. Nothing crazy. Just enough to make it believable." I inhaled deeply. There were a million ways this could go wrong. And yet, "All right," I said, exhaling. "I'll do it. But you owe me. Big time." Sarah let out a relieved laugh. "Oh, trust me, I know. You're my hero, Mike." We spent the next 30 minutes discussing logistics, what her parents expected, how we'd met, and how long we had to sell the story. As I hung up the phone, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling curling in my stomach. What the hell was I getting myself into? The preparation. The week flew by, and as much as I tried to ignore it, the whole fake boyfriend thing kept creeping into my mind. How did one even prepare for something like this? I found myself overthinking things. What to wear, how to act, what to say. Would her dad buy it? Would anyone? Saturday arrived too quickly, and before I knew it, I was standing in front of my bathroom mirror, adjusting my button-down shirt for the 100th time. "You look fine," I told my reflection. Still, I felt oddly nervous, like I was about to walk into a job interview I wasn't remotely qualified for. Finally, with a resigned sigh, I grabbed my keys and drove over to Sarah's place. When she opened the door, I almost forgot to breathe. She stood there in a simple but elegant dress, her hair styled in soft waves, her eyes bright with a mix of excitement and nerves. She was beautiful. I swallowed hard. This was going to be harder than I thought. "You ready for this?" she asked, smirking slightly. I forced a grin. As ready as I'll ever be. Good. She grabbed my arm and pulled me inside. Let's go over the game plan one more time. Meeting the family. Sarah's family lived in a charming suburban neighborhood, the kind with neatly trimmed lawns and perfectly spaced houses. The moment we stepped through the front door, I felt the weight of their expectations settle over me. Her mother, a warm and welcoming woman with kind eyes, immediately pulled me into a hug. "Oh, so you're the famous Mike. We've heard so much about you." I shot Sarah a look, but she just grinned. Her father, on the other hand, was exactly as she had described, tall, stern, and with a gaze sharp enough to cut steel. He eyed me critically, sizing me up like a man trying to decide if I was worthy of his daughter. I swallowed. This was going to be fun. "So," he said gruffly, "how did you two meet?" Sarah jumped in before I could answer. "Through mutual friends," she said smoothly. "We just kind of clicked." I nodded, playing along. "Yeah, she kind of just stole my attention," I said, flashing a smile. Hard not to, with how she lights up a room. Sarah's dad grunted, clearly unimpressed, but her mother beamed. "That's so sweet." As dinner began, I found myself slipping into the role surprisingly easily. I laughed at her dad's dry jokes, made small talk with her brother, and even charmed her grandmother. But the hardest part wasn't pretending. The hardest part was the unexpected moments, the way Sarah would reach for my hand absent-mindedly, the way she looked at me when she thought no one was watching, the way our bodies naturally leaned toward each other when we spoke. There was something unspoken between us, something I hadn't expected. By the time the evening wound down, Sarah's father, who had been eyeing me with suspicion all night, gave me a small nod of approval. I had passed the test. As we sat outside on the porch, sipping coffee, Sarah let out a deep breath. "That went surprisingly well." I chuckled. "Yeah, I think your dad might actually like me." She smirked. "Don't get too comfortable. He's still watching you." I laughed but noticed something different in her gaze. A softness, a flicker of something genuine. This was supposed to be an act. So why did it suddenly feel so real? As I drove home that night, my mind was spinning. This was just the beginning. And somehow, I had a feeling I was in way over my head. The illusion begins. I woke up the next morning with a strange feeling in my chest, like the remnants of a dream that refused to fade. Last night had gone better than I'd expected, but it had also left me with a gnawing uncertainty. I had agreed to be Sarah's fake boyfriend, just for a few weeks, to help her escape the pressures of her family's expectations. Simple enough, right? But after sitting across from her father, shaking his hand, and seeing the way Sarah looked at me under the dim glow of the porch light, I wasn't sure what was real anymore. The problem was, for a lie to be convincing, you had to sell it. That meant I couldn't hesitate when Sarah reached for my hand, couldn't flinch when she leaned into me, and certainly couldn't let my heart race when her fingers casually brushed against mine. Except that last part. Yeah, that was already happening. I was getting too comfortable in this role. I had to remind myself, this wasn't real. But when Sarah texted me later that morning with a simple brunch with friends, "Be my charming boyfriend again," I found myself agreeing without hesitation. A table for two, and 5 more. The cafe was packed when I arrived, the scent of fresh coffee and maple syrup hanging in the air. I spotted Sarah right away. She was standing near the entrance, chatting with a group of people I didn't recognize. She looked effortlessly beautiful, her loose curls bouncing slightly as she laughed. For a moment, I let myself watch her, unguarded, before shaking off whatever stupid thoughts were creeping in. I was here for a job. That's all this was. When she caught sight of me, she grinned and waved me over. "Mike, you made it." Her hand reached for mine without hesitation, fingers lacing together with an ease that was both alarming and kind of nice. I squeezed back instinctively. "What the hell are you doing?" My brain screamed at me. "Everyone, "This is Mike," she announced, pulling me forward to the group. "Mike, these are my friends, Melissa, Brandon, Jules, and Sam." They all greeted me warmly, except for one, a woman with short, dark hair who was eyeing me like I was a puzzle she was determined to solve. "So," Jules said, propping her chin on her hand, "you're the famous boyfriend we've heard so much about." I shot Sarah a quick glance. "Famous?" She gave me a sheepish shrug. "I might have mentioned you a few times." The way her friends were looking at me told me she had done more than just mention me. I smiled, keeping my tone light. "All good things, I hope." Sam, a guy with shaggy blonde hair, snorted. "Mostly. Though I will say, we're all surprised. We were starting to think Sarah was sworn to eternal singlehood." Sarah groaned. "Thanks, Sam." I chuckled. "Well, I'm just lucky, I guess." Jules raised an eyebrow. "How did you two meet again?" The way she asked it made me pause. There was something in her tone, a skepticism that sent a small ripple of unease through me. Sarah jumped in before I could answer. "Through mutual friends. It was kind of a random thing, but we just clicked." I nodded, playing along. "Yeah, she has a way of pulling people in. Hard to resist." Sarah shot me a look, and for a moment I thought I saw something shift in her expression. Was she surprised by my answer? I pushed the thought aside as the conversation moved on. We ordered food, and soon the table was buzzing with laughter and stories. Everyone relaxed and comfortable. Well, almost everyone. Jules, for some reason, kept watching me like she was waiting for me to slip up. Finally, when Sarah got up to grab more napkins, Jules leaned in. "So, Mike," she said, voice casual but with a sharp edge, "tell me, what's Sarah's favorite food?" I blinked. Shit." She smirked. "Oh, come on. You've been together for months, right? You have to know that." I scrambled to think. Sarah and I had never actually talked about things like that. Jules was testing me. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Sarah returning, her eyes flickering between us as if sensing the tension. I took a gamble. "She's a sucker for anything with chocolate," I said smoothly. "But if you really want to win her over, give her fresh strawberries." She pretends she's not obsessed, but she totally is. Jules' eyebrows shot up, and Sarah froze mid-step. I gotten lucky. "Damn," Sam muttered. "Dude knows his stuff." Jules leaned back, watching me with narrowed eyes. "I suppose he does." Sarah slid back into her seat beside me, giving me a subtle nudge under the table. "Nice save," her eyes seemed to say. I exhaled, barely containing my relief. This was just the beginning, and I had a feeling keeping up this illusion was going to be harder than I thought. The drive that changed everything. After brunch, Sarah and I walked back to my car. The moment we were alone, she turned to me, arms crossed. "You guessed, didn't you?" I feigned innocence. "Guessed what?" "My favorite food." I smirked. "Maybe." She shook her head, but she was smiling. "You got lucky." I unlocked the car, and we both climbed in. For a few moments, there was only silence, the soft hum of the radio filling the space between us. Then, out of nowhere, Sarah spoke. "I keep forgetting this isn't real." Her words hit me like a gut punch. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white. "So it's not just me." I swallowed. "Yeah, me too." Silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. Then she let out a breathless laugh. "This is insane, right? I mean, we're really doing this." I glanced at her. "Yeah, we are." Her gaze met mine, and for a split second, something shifted. I should have looked away. I should have reminded myself that this was all pretend. But I didn't. Instead, I let myself wonder, just for a second, what it would be like if it was real. The blurred lines. The moment Sarah said she kept forgetting this wasn't real, something inside me shifted. I should have shrugged it off, laughed, made a joke to keep things light. But I didn't. Instead, I gripped the steering wheel, staring ahead as the weight of those words sank into me like an anchor. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. The tension in the car was thick, charged with something unspoken, something neither of us was quite ready to acknowledge. Then Sarah let out a soft laugh. It wasn't forced or awkward, just genuine. "This is crazy, right?" she said, glancing at me. I forced a smile. Completely. We sat there for another moment before I finally started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot. But even as I drove, my mind was spinning. We were playing pretend, weren't we? Then why did it feel more and more like the line between fake and real was blurring? And why, when Sarah reached over and turned up the volume on the radio, singing along to a song she loved, did my heart skip in a way it absolutely shouldn't have? The unexpected invitation. For the next few days, Sarah and I kept up the act. We texted more often, our conversations flowing easier than before. She started calling me randomly, and we talked about everything and nothing. Our jobs, our favorite movies, childhood memories. It felt natural. But that was the problem, wasn't it? Natural wasn't part of the plan. Then, on Wednesday afternoon, she called me again. "Hey," she said, her voice carrying that familiar mix of excitement and nerves. "So I know this is last minute, but can you come to my cousin's engagement party this Saturday?" I raised an eyebrow. "Another family event?" She groaned. I know. But my dad was asking about you again, and my mom told half the family that I was bringing my amazing boyfriend. So now I'm kind of stuck." I smirked. "Amazing, huh? Don't let it go to your head." I chuckled. "All right, I'll go. But you definitely owe me dinner after this." She laughed. "Deal." I didn't know why I agreed so quickly. Maybe because I liked spending time with her. Or maybe I didn't want this to end. Dressed for deception. Saturday arrived before I knew it, and suddenly I was standing in front of my mirror again, adjusting my suit like a guy heading into battle. I told myself this wasn't a big deal. But my reflection, yeah, it wasn't buying it. I sighed, ran a hand through my hair, and grabbed my keys. When I pulled up to Sarah's apartment, she was waiting outside. And the second I saw her, I forgot how to breathe. She was stunning. Her dress was deep emerald, flowing but fitted in all the right places. Her dark hair cascaded down her shoulders, and when she turned to look at me, smiling, something in my chest tightened. I had never really let myself look at her before. Not like this. But now I was in trouble. "You clean up nicely," she said, giving me a once-over. I chuckled, forcing my voice to stay casual. "You don't look too bad yourself." She rolled her eyes, but the smile stayed. And then, before I could overthink it, she reached for my hand, fingers lacing through mine. The warmth of her touch sent a jolt through me. "This okay?" she asked softly. I swallowed. "Yeah," I said, my voice rougher than I intended. "It's okay." A party of whispers and watchful eyes. The engagement party was held at a grand venue, the kind of place with twinkling lights and expensive decor. Sarah's family was everywhere, and the moment we walked in, all eyes turned to us. I tightened my grip on her hand, silently asking if she was all right. She squeezed back. "We got this," she whispered. I nodded, offering her a small smile. We mingled, made small talk, smiled at all the right people. Sarah's dad watched us like a hawk, but her mom beamed every time she looked at us, practically glowing with pride. I should have felt ridiculous, but instead, I felt something else. Something dangerous, because the way Sarah laughed at my jokes, the way she touched my arm absent-mindedly, none of it felt forced. And the way I looked at her, yeah, that wasn't fake at all. Jules is back with questions. Somewhere between dinner and drinks, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned to find Jules standing there, arms crossed, that same skeptical look on her face. "You again," I said with a grin. here to interrogate me some more. She smirked. I wouldn't call it interrogation. More like curiosity. I took a sip of my drink. Go ahead then. What do you want to know? She tilted her head, studying me. You really like her, don't you? I blinked. I mean, she continued, I get it. The way you look at her, it's not fake. I hesitated. We're just. Jules held up a hand. Don't even try to sell me the pretend couple story. I can tell when someone's lying. And Mike, I swallowed. You're lying to yourself. And with that, she walked away, leaving me standing there, staring after her. The kiss that changed everything. I found Sarah outside on the balcony, staring out at the city skyline. She turned when she heard me, smiling softly. Hey, she said. I leaned against the railing beside her. Hey. For a moment, we just stood there, the music from inside drifting into the night. Then, Sarah exhaled. Jules is onto us, isn't she? I chuckled. Yeah, she's not convinced. She smirked. She never liked anything easy. Silence. Then, she looked at me. Really looked at me. And something in my chest tightened all over again. Before I could stop myself, I reached up, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Her breath hitched. I should have stepped back. But I didn't. Instead, I leaned in. And the moment my lips touched hers, everything changed. When the lie feels like the truth. Sarah's lips were soft against mine. Hesitant at first, like she was unsure if we were really doing this, if this was part of the act. But it wasn't. Not anymore. Somewhere along the way, pretending had stopped feeling like a game. The lines had blurred, and now, as she kissed me back, her fingers curling around the lapel of my suit, I knew we had crossed a threshold we couldn't walk back from. I wasn't sure who moved first, if it was her pressing closer or me deepening the kiss, but when she finally pulled away, I saw it in her eyes. Confusion. Desire. And worst of all, fear. She exhaled shakily. Mike. I swallowed hard. Yeah. She searched my face, as if looking for an answer that I wasn't even sure I had. Then she stepped back. We should go back inside, she said, her voice softer now, more uncertain. I nodded, stuffing my hands into my pockets to keep from reaching for her again. Yeah. Let's go. The aftermath of a kiss that wasn't supposed to happen. The rest of the engagement party was a blur. We went through the motions, smiling, chatting with family, playing our roles like nothing had happened. But I could feel it. The shift. Sarah was quieter, her usual playful teasing missing. Every time our eyes met, she'd look away too quickly. And me. I was trying not to drive myself insane replaying the moment on the balcony. Had she kissed me back because she wanted to? Or was it just an impulse, something she'd regret later? By the time we finally left the party and I drove her home, the tension between us was suffocating. She hesitated before getting out of the car, her hand on the door handle. Thanks for coming tonight, she said, her voice careful, measured. I gripped the steering wheel. Sarah. She looked at me then, her eyes guarded. For a moment, I considered pushing, asking her what that kiss meant, what we meant now. But she beat me to it. We should forget about what happened, she said quickly. I mean, it was just in the moment, right? Something in my chest tightened, but I forced a nod. Yeah, I lied. Just in the moment. She smiled, too forced, too polite. Good night, Mike. Then she was gone, slipping inside her apartment and leaving me sitting there, staring at the empty passenger seat, realizing that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't pretending anymore. The distance that followed. For the next week, things between Sarah and me felt different. We still texted, but not as often. She called me once, but the conversation was short, filled with awkward pauses and a tension we couldn't ignore. I told myself it was fine, that this was bound to happen, that of course we have to reset boundaries after a moment like that. But the truth was, I missed her. Missed the way she laughed at my dumb jokes. Missed the way she always sent me texts filled with random thoughts, like, is cereal really soup? Or, what if trees could talk? Missed the way she made me feel like I belonged somewhere. I had agreed to be her fake boyfriend, but somewhere along the way, I had become something more, and I didn't know how to go back to being just friends. A breaking point. It wasn't until Friday night that I saw her again. I was at home, sitting on my couch, flipping mindlessly through channels, when my phone buzzed. "Sarah. Hey, are you free?" I frowned, my heart kicking up a notch. "Yeah, everything okay? Can you come over?" There was something about the way she asked that made me move faster than I should have. 15 minutes later, I was knocking on her apartment door. She opened it, and the second I saw her, I knew something was wrong. She looked exhausted, her eyes red like she had been crying. "Sarah," I said, stepping inside. "What's going on?" She sighed, rubbing her arms like she was trying to hold herself together. "It's just been a long week." I studied her. "This is about the kiss, isn't it?" I asked quietly. She flinched. I stepped closer. "Sarah, talk to me." She hesitated, then exhaled. "I don't know what's real anymore, Mike." I froze. She let out a bitter laugh. "I mean, this was supposed to be fake, right? Just a favor, just something to get my dad off my back." I nodded slowly. "But then you showed up, and you—" She stopped, shaking her head. "You made it too easy. Too real. And now I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this." I took another step forward, closing the space between us. "You don't have to do anything," I said, my voice softer now. "Just tell me the truth." She met my gaze, her walls crumbling. "I think I like you," she whispered, "and that scares me." Something inside me snapped. Before I could stop myself, I reached for her, cupping her face gently. "Sarah, you don't have to be scared." She swallowed hard. "But what if we ruin everything?" I smiled, brushing my thumb over her cheek. "Or what if we get it right?" She stared at me, her breath shaky. Then, slowly, cautiously, she leaned in. And this time, when our lips met, there was no hesitation. No pretending. No act. Just us. Just real. Sarah's lips met mine, soft and uncertain at first, but within seconds, the hesitation melted. This wasn't like the first kiss. That one had been impulsive, something we both backed away from too quickly, afraid to acknowledge what it meant. But this was deliberate. This was two people standing at the edge of something unknown, finally willing to take the leap. Her hands trembled slightly as they slid up to rest on my chest, gripping my shirt like she wasn't sure if she wanted to pull me closer or push me away. I wasn't sure either. All I knew was that every nerve in my body was telling me to hold on to this moment. When we finally broke apart, her forehead rested against mine, her breathing uneven. I wanted to say something, but I didn't know what. For once, words weren't enough. Sarah swallowed, then slowly stepped back, creating a distance between us that immediately felt too far. Her eyes met mine, searching. "Mike." I exhaled sharply, running a hand through my hair. "Yeah." She looked torn, like she was fighting a battle within herself. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I stepped forward instinctively, but she held up a hand. "I like you," she said, almost as if she was still trying to convince herself that it was real. "And that scares me." My chest tightened. "You don't have to be scared," I told her, keeping my voice steady. "We can take this slow. We don't have to figure everything out tonight." She let out a breathless laugh, shaking her head. "That's the problem, Mike. This was never supposed to be real, and now I feel like I'm losing control." She turned away, pacing slightly, rubbing her arms like she was trying to physically hold herself together. I let her have that moment, because I knew Sarah well enough by now to understand. She needed space to process things before she let anyone in. So I waited. After a long pause, she finally spoke again. My dad, my whole family, really, they've always expected me to have my life figured out. A stable career, a perfect relationship, a neat little plan for the future. She let out a shaky breath. But that's never been me. I've always been too focused on my work, too independent for their liking. And for the longest time, I thought, maybe they were right. Maybe I was missing something. She turned to look at me. And then you showed up. I froze. I thought this fake relationship would just be a way to keep them off my back, she admitted, voice softer now. But somewhere along the way, you became more than that. You felt real. And that terrifies me, because if this is real, then I don't know what comes next. I took a slow breath, choosing my words carefully. Sarah, do you want this to be real? She hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything I needed to know. It wasn't that she didn't feel something for me. It was that she was afraid of what it meant. I nodded, stepping back. Okay. She blinked. Okay. I get it, I said, forcing a small smile. You need time. Her lips parted slightly, like she was about to say something, but then she closed her mouth again. I could see the battle in her eyes. Do I let him in? Do I run? She didn't know. So I made the choice for her. I'm not going anywhere, I told her, reaching for the door. But I won't force you into something you're not ready for. You tell me when you know what you want. And with that, I walked out, leaving her standing in the middle of her apartment, staring after me like she wasn't sure whether to chase me or let me go. The weight of uncertainty. The moment I got home, I felt the emptiness settle in. I flopped onto my couch, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every single second of that conversation. I had told her I would wait. And I meant it. But what if she never figured it out? What if she walked away? What if I had just let go of something I was never going to get back? I groaned, rubbing my hands over my face. This was not how I expected things to go. I had thought, naively, maybe, that she'd see it, that she'd feel it, that she'd realize we were already halfway into something real, and all she had to do was stop fighting it. But I should have known better. Sarah wasn't the kind of person who let herself fall easily. She overanalyzed, she hesitated, she questioned, and I had no idea if she was going to let herself take the leap. The absence that spoke louder than words. Days passed, then a week, then two. Sarah and I barely spoke, not because I didn't want to, but because I knew she needed time. Still, that didn't stop me from missing her. It didn't stop me from wanting to text her every time I saw something funny, or wanting to call her just to hear her voice. It didn't stop me from wondering if I had made a mistake by walking away that night. But I had meant what I said. I wouldn't force her into something she wasn't ready for. She had to come to me. And the more time that passed, the more I started to wonder, was she ever going to? The breaking point. It was a Friday night when my phone finally rang. Sarah. For a second, I just stared at her name on the screen. Then, with a deep breath, I answered, "Hey." She didn't say anything right away. Then, "Can you meet me?" Her voice was quiet, almost uncertain. But I didn't hesitate. "Where?" She let out a slow breath. "The park. The one we always go to." My heart kicked up a notch. "I'll be there in 10. The moment of truth. When I arrived, she was already there. Sitting on a bench, arms wrapped around herself, staring at the ground. She looked up when she heard my footsteps, her expression unreadable. I sat down beside her, waiting. After a long silence, she spoke. "I missed you," she admitted, "and I hated it." I exhaled. "Yeah, me too." She swallowed. "I thought about everything. About us. About what we were pretending to be and what we actually are." I waited. She turned to me, eyes filled with something raw and unguarded. I don't want to pretend anymore. My breath caught. She reached for my hand, lacing our fingers together. I want you. For the first time in weeks, I let myself breathe. And then, as I pulled her close, my forehead resting against hers, I whispered the only thing I could. Finally. More than pretend. The moment Sarah said those words, I don't want to pretend anymore, it felt like the weight I'd been carrying for weeks finally lifted. I had spent so much time questioning, waiting, wondering if she would ever come to terms with what was happening between us. And now she was sitting right in front of me, fingers laced with mine, looking at me with something unguarded, something real. But I wasn't about to rush her. So instead of kissing her the way I wanted to, instead of pulling her into my arms and never letting go, I just squeezed her hand gently. Are you sure? I asked, my voice careful. Because once we do this, once we admit this is real, there's no going back. Sarah exhaled slowly. I know. She bit her lip, hesitating, then continued. I needed time to be sure, because this thing between us, it wasn't supposed to happen. It wasn't part of the plan. She gave a half laugh, shaking her head. I was supposed to prove to my family that I was doing fine on my own, that I didn't need some picture-perfect love story to be successful. She turned to face me fully, her voice softer now. And then you came along. I felt my heart pound at the way she was looking at me. You made it easy, she admitted. Too easy. And I got scared, because suddenly I wasn't pretending anymore, and I didn't know how to handle that. I nodded, giving her the space to let it all out. She took a deep breath, as if gathering courage, then met my eyes again. But I don't want to keep pretending I don't feel this way about you. I don't want to waste more time convincing myself that this is some elaborate illusion when I know it's not. I swallowed hard. Sarah. She shifted closer, her free hand resting lightly on my knee. I want to try, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. For real. That was all I needed to hear. This time, when I leaned in, she didn't hesitate. Her lips met mine, warm and familiar. But now there was no uncertainty, no questioning. This kiss was different. It wasn't part of the act. It wasn't just a moment of weakness. It was real. And it changed everything. Figuring it out. We sat there for a long time after that, our fingers still intertwined, the cool night air wrapping around us. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that comes after something important has been said. The kind where words aren't needed, where just existing next to someone feels like enough. But eventually, reality had to catch up. So, I said, breaking the quiet, what now? Sarah let out a soft laugh. Honestly, I have no idea. I smirked. Great. We're off to a solid start then. She nudged me playfully. Oh, shut up. I grinned but sobered quickly. I mean it though. What does this look like for us now? Do we tell your family? Do we let them keep thinking we've been dating this whole time, just for the sake of avoiding another awkward conversation? Sarah groaned, dropping her head into her hands. Ugh. That's a whole mess I don't even want to think about yet. I chuckled. I'm guessing your dad will have some questions. She shot me a glare. Understatement of the century. After a moment, she sighed and leaned her head against my shoulder. But you know what? She murmured. I don't care. I raised an eyebrow. Oh. She turned her head to look at me, her face so close that I could see every detail, the way her lips curved into the smallest smile, the way her eyes softened when they met mine. For once, I'm not going to overthink this, she admitted. I just want to enjoy it. I grinned. You? Not overthinking. Now that is impressive. She groaned. You're ruining the moment. I laughed, wrapping an arm around her. All right. No more teasing. She exhaled contentedly. Good. And just like that, we sat there, leaning into each other, figuring it out one breath at a time. The first real date. A few days later, Sarah texted me. Sarah, Sue, technically, we've gone on like a dozen fake dates, but I feel like we need a real one. Thoughts? I smirked at my phone before replying. Me, you asking me out, Connors. Sarah, maybe I am. You in or what? Me, absolutely. Sarah, pick me up at 7. And wear something nice. Mr. Fake Boyfriend turned real. I chuckled, shaking my head. This was really happening. When I arrived at Sarah's apartment that evening, I had to take a deep breath before knocking. This felt different. The weight of pretending was gone. Now it was just us. When she opened the door, I felt my heart skip in a way that still startled me. She was wearing a dark blue dress, simple but effortlessly stunning. Her smile was small but genuine. You clean up well, she said, giving me an approving nod. I smirked. Right back at you. For a second, we just stood there, neither of us quite sure how to start this new phase. Then Sarah exhaled. Okay, this is weird, right? It's weird. I laughed. A little. She groaned. We already know everything about each other. And yet this feels like a first date. I tilted my head. That's because it is. She blinked. I stepped forward, closing the distance between us. This, I said, reaching for her hand, is the first time we're doing this for real. She stared at me for a moment, then smiled. All right, she said, nodding. Let's do this. For real. And with that, we stepped out into the night, together. What comes next? Dinner was amazing. Not because of the restaurant or the food, but because it was us. No pretending. No careful scripting. Just two people who had spent weeks playing a role and finally realizing they didn't need to anymore. By the time I walked her to her door at the end of the night, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. Sarah turned to face me, her expression soft but serious. So, she murmured, are we doing this? I reached up, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. We're doing this. Her smile grew. Good, she whispered. Then she kissed me. And just like that, what started as a lie became the most real thing in my life. The truth we can't escape. Falling into something real was never part of the plan. And yet here we were. After weeks of pretending, of carefully balancing between reality and illusion, Sarah and I had finally stepped over the line. And it was terrifying, exciting, absolutely, undeniably real. But the thing about crossing a line, there's no going back. And neither of us was prepared for what came next. The first morning after, waking up the next day, I half expected to feel different, like something monumental had shifted in the universe overnight. But life had a funny way of moving forward, regardless of what was happening in my chest. So instead of lying in bed overanalyzing, I got up, made some coffee, and tried to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do now that Sarah and I had officially decided we were real. Because the thing about real relationships, they came with real complications. And we were about to face our first one. Facing the family. Sarah's mom called her that afternoon, her voice filled with excitement. So, when are you bringing Mike over again? Sarah froze. I knew because I was sitting right next to her on her couch when she answered the call, watching as panic flickered across her face. Soon, she said quickly, shooting me a look. Her mom hummed. You two were adorable at the engagement party. Your father hasn't stopped talking about him. Sarah groaned. Oh God. I smirked. Nice to know I made an impression. She threw a pillow at me. Anyway, her mom continued. I think we should have a nice little dinner this weekend. Just the family. Something intimate. Sarah choked. Mom, no. Saturday at 7. Tell Mike to bring wine. Click. The call ended. Sarah turned to me, looking mildly horrified. I grinned. Guess we're doing family dinner. She buried her face in her hands. This is a disaster waiting to happen. I nudged her playfully. Come on. It'll be fine. She peeked at me through her fingers. You do realize they think we've been dating for months, right? I blinked. Oh, right. We had just made our relationship real. But to her family, it had been real for a while now. That meant we were about to enter dangerous territory, the part where our real selves had to match the version of us they already believed in. Great. What could go wrong? The dinner disaster, because of course, it was a disaster. Saturday came way too fast. I showed up at Sarah's parents' house with a bottle of red wine and a knot in my stomach. Her dad opened the door, arms crossed, giving me the kind of look that made me wonder if he secretly worked for the CIA. Mike. I swallowed. Mr. Connors. He nodded once, then stepped aside. Come in. Sarah shot me a be cool glance as she pulled me inside, but I could already tell this was not going to be a smooth night. Red flags and raised eyebrows. Dinner started off normal enough. Her mom gushed about how happy she was that Sarah had finally found someone, while her younger brother, Tyler, made it his mission to interrogate me. So, Mike, he said, smirking, how'd you win my sister over? I shot Sarah a quick glance. We had never actually talked about our story beyond the basics. I was about to throw out something generic when Sarah, to my complete surprise, answered for me. He never gave up, she said, smiling at me in a way that made my chest tighten. I blinked. What? Her father narrowed his eyes. Never gave up. Sarah nodded, playing with her wine glass. Yeah, I wasn't sure I wanted to be in a relationship, but Mike just kept showing up, kept proving to me that he was serious, that he cared. She looked at me then, her expression unreadable. And eventually, I realized I felt the same way. I swallowed hard. Because for a story that was supposed to be fake, it felt way too real. Her dad studied me for a long moment, then, to my complete shock, nodded approvingly. I like that. Sarah's mom sighed happily. Oh, you two are just perfect together. Tyler snorted. Gross. Sarah rolled her eyes, and I forced a laugh. But inside, my mind was racing. Because if I didn't know any better, I'd say Sarah had just told the truth. The unexpected confession. Later that night, after dinner, Sarah and I took a walk through her neighborhood, the cool night air settling between us. I was still thinking about what she had said at the table. You meant that, I said finally. She glanced at me. Meant what? What you said, about me never giving up. She hesitated. Then, slowly, she nodded. Yeah, she admitted. Because it's true. I stopped walking, turning to face her. She sighed, crossing her arms like she was bracing herself. I fought this for so long, Mike. I told myself it was just convenient, that we were just acting. But the truth is, somewhere along the way, I stopped pretending. And I think, she exhaled sharply. I think I was just too scared to admit it. My heart was pounding. Sarah. She met my gaze. I want this. Us. I really want this. And that was all I needed to hear. I pulled her toward me, capturing her lips in a kiss that was deep, slow, and filled with everything we had left unsaid. She melted into me, her hands gripping my jacket like she never wanted to let go. And for the first time in weeks, I knew. Neither of us was pretending anymore. Epilogue. The reality check. A few months later, we found ourselves at another family gathering. This time, things were different. Sarah's dad wasn't interrogating me. Her mom was already planning our future wedding. And Tyler? He was still rolling his eyes every time we got too close. But the best part, Sarah wasn't overthinking anymore. She wasn't hesitating. She was just with me. And when she reached for my hand under the table, smiling in that way that made my chest feel lighter than air, I knew. This wasn't just some fake relationship we fell into by accident. This was real. And for the first time in my life, I had never been more sure of anything. Sarah's lips were warm against mine, lingering longer than before, no hesitation, no fear. For so long we had pretended. lied to her family, lied to ourselves. But right now, there was no pretending. She wasn't kissing me because we were keeping up an illusion. She was kissing me because she wanted to. And I was kissing her back because I had wanted this for so much longer than I was willing to admit. The night air was cool around us, but I barely noticed. All I could focus on was the way Sarah sighed against my lips, the way she held on to me like she was afraid to let go. And when we finally pulled apart, her forehead rested against mine, her breath shaky. "Well," she whispered, a small breathless laugh escaping her lips. That was definitely not fake. I grinned, brushing my thumb across her cheek. No, it wasn't. She swallowed, her eyes flickering with something between excitement and uncertainty. "So what happens now?" she asked softly. I didn't hesitate. "We stop pretending," I said, squeezing her hand. "For good." Her lips parted slightly, and for a moment I wondered if she was going to panic again. But then a slow smile crept onto her face. "I like the sound of that," she admitted. Relief washed over me. I pulled her into my arms, holding her close, and she melted into me like she belonged there. And honestly, she did. Life after pretending. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Sarah. "Sarah, so, wanna go on an actual, real-life, non-fake date today?" I smirked at my phone before replying. Me, I'd love nothing more. A few seconds later, another text popped up. "Sarah, good. Pick me up at 6, and bring that smile I like so much." My heart did a stupid little flip. Because she liked my smile. Because this wasn't fake anymore. And because for the first time since we started this ridiculous arrangement, I wasn't anxious about what came next. I was just happy. The first real date. When I picked her up that evening, she was waiting by the door, wearing a red dress that made my brain short-circuit for a solid 10 seconds. She laughed when she saw me staring. "You okay there, champ?" I cleared my throat, shaking myself out of it. Yeah, just. Wow." She smirked. "I'll take that as a compliment." "You should." I opened the car door for her, and as she slid inside, she glanced up at me. "By the way," she said, grinning, "this is the first date where I don't have to worry about impressing anyone but you." I smiled. "Good, because I'm already impressed." She blushed, and I knew, in that moment, that this was real, that this was what I had been waiting for. The family finds out. We kept things between us for a little while, just for us, just so we could enjoy what we had before opening it up to the world. But of course, that didn't last long. At the next family gathering, Sarah's mom pulled her aside the second we walked in the door. "So," she asked, eyes twinkling, "when's the wedding?" Sarah groaned. "Mom." Her dad smirked at me from across the room. "You're still around, huh?" I grinned. "Wouldn't dream of being anywhere else, sir." For the first time, I saw something shift in his expression. Approval. I hadn't just passed whatever test he had been putting me through. I had earned my place here. Tyler, of course, was still his usual self. He plopped down next to Sarah and me at the dinner table, eyeing us with fake suspicion. "So let me get this straight," he said. "You two actually fell for each other, after months of faking it." Sarah rolled her eyes. Yeah. Laugh it up." He smirked. "I'm just saying, this is the most cliché rom-com nonsense I've ever heard." I shrugged. What can I say? Sometimes life is just good storytelling. Sarah groaned. "Oh God, you're insufferable." Tyler snickered. "You're stuck with him now, sis." Sarah turned to me, exhaling dramatically. "Guess I am." But when she smiled, her fingers lacing through mine under the table, I knew. She wouldn't have it any other way. The happily ever after, kind of. Things didn't magically become perfect overnight. We still had moments of doubt, little insecurities creeping in every now and then. Sarah still had a habit of overthinking everything. I still had a tendency to joke my way through serious conversations. But at the end of the day, We had each other, and that was enough. Months later, we found ourselves curled up on my couch, watching some terrible movie we weren't even paying attention to. Sarah's head was resting on my chest, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing patterns against my arm. "You know," she murmured, "this whole fake relationship thing. Kind of the best mistake I've ever made." I chuckled, kissing the top of her head. "Yeah." She nodded. "Yeah." I smirked. "So, technically, we owe your dad for pushing you into all this." She groaned. "Ugh. Do not say that to him. He'll never let me live it down." I laughed. Noted. For a moment, we just sat there, wrapped up in each other, the kind of quiet that wasn't empty, but full. Then Sarah sighed. "You know what's funny?" she mused. "What?" She glanced up at me, smiling softly. "I spent so long convincing myself this wasn't real," she admitted. "And now I can't imagine my life without you." I felt my heart squeeze in the best way possible. I cupped her cheek, brushing my thumb against her skin. "Well," I murmured, "lucky for you, you'll never have to." And when I kissed her, slow and steady, like we had all the time in the world, I knew, without a doubt, this was forever.